So how many of y'all know the story of David? David is one of my favorite stories in the Bible because he's like prototypical in a lot of different ways for believers and unbelievers alike. I'm in there several times a year just reading this story over and over again because there's so many nuances. Sidebar, I feel like the book of Joshua is the same way because that's really the beginning of the first exodus of the children of God, right? That was like the very first one. So Moses kind of did the heavy lifting to get them out of the first bondage, and then Joshua took it from there, right? So that's a sidebar. And I really want to like unpack the book of Joshua on multiple layers, and like that's probably going to be conversation that we have coming up in the future. But for now, David is always just going to be at the top of my list underneath Christ when it comes to drawing parallels in everyday life, right? So for one, let's just start with the humility. David was always a boy after God's own heart. He was somebody who loved God since the time he was really small, just had a heart for people, had a heart for God. And this is before Jesus said, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and all your strength, and then love people like you love yourself, right? David came before all of that, and it's just one of the reasons why God left a lamp for David, right? If you know the story, it says God left a lamp for David, and through his legacy, eventually Christ came. And he just comes from a line of nobility, and I don't mean that in the sense of like, well, it is royal family, but what I really mean is nobility of the heart. His heart posture was just pure and golden, and he wasn't perfect by any means. If you know the story, you know that David made some really, interesting mistakes, to say the least. And it's the love that God had for him that still blessed his legacy, even though he was highly imperfect. So starting with his humility, starting with his love for God, the way he loved people, the fact that he really wasn't looking to be exalted at the onset, right? Like he was just a humble shepherd boy. He just wanted to serve. And he ended up being the first called leader of Israel, called by God at least, to actually show the example of what a righteous king looks like, in part because he had such a heart for servanthood. And that's something that I feel like just in general in the world, we see a lot of people wanting to be leaders. Everybody wants to be exalted in society. Everybody wants to have this high, lofty positioning, but not necessarily understanding that when it comes to actual integral value, right? Just intrinsic value and excellence, it starts with a heart of service. So before we even get to him being king, as he was being positioned to be king while Saul was still actually king, Saul was trying to take his head off just out of pure jealousy, out of envy that David was loved and was favored while he was still king, right? So that's something that a lot of us can also relate to, is that like we might be just following our own call, our own path, and not trying to take anybody's position, but people are still threatened by the fact that you have this favor, this particular peculiar favor that they can't understand, right? So they want to take you out for it. Then you have the fact that everything that David did was thus saith the Lord, so to speak, right? He really wouldn't make too many moves if God didn't tell him to do it. Matter of fact, the pattern that I noticed is that his favor was like unfettered. Like he just had favor on favor on favor, winning all the battles up until the moment he did something without checking in with God. And then when it comes to, and this is, I'm talking about like into the time that he actually became king, he had unfettered success. He had success that the enemy just couldn't break through. Like he had just win after win after win after win. And unfortunately for him, fortunately for us, because we get a chance to learn from his story and his mistakes, but the minute he stopped consulting God, even though David was still blessed and covered in many regards, that's where his decline started, right? The situation that happened with Bathsheba and everything that came after that, how his household fell under a curse, his lineage fell under, let me not say a curse, but there started to be chinks in the armor that really didn't have to be there. And that's what happens when disobedience sets in, and it became a pattern, and he stopped consulting the Lord the way he once would. And although Solomon was put in place, so to speak, to carry on the lineage, David's mistake with Bathsheba was multiplied 10 hundreds fold with Solomon, right? Solomon had so much wisdom, but he just could not quell his desire for women, and his disobedience set in again, just like his father, through lust, basically, and a desire to please that situation more than he was pleasing God. So just getting back to the root of it, you can see how David's disobedience, those spiritual bonds seemingly passed to his son. And everybody has their own shot. Had Solomon chosen differently and just been obedient again, right? This is free will, this is individuality. Solomon didn't have to fall to lust and to women, but just interestingly, when you look back at his dad's mistake, he took it 1,000-fold, and it became his own downfall. And that stems from David, right? So there's a lot that just stems back to David. Again, even the coming of Christ comes through the line of David. But I just think that that's one of those stories that you should really sit with, really get in the book of Samuel, both books of Samuel, and take your time, really read through the stories of David. Don't just pay attention to what happened, but also look at what didn't happen. Pay attention to everything that he did at the word of the Lord, and then pay attention to the instances where he didn't consult with God first, and look at how those situations played out. The Bible doesn't mention this explicitly. You just have to pay attention to the patterns. You know what I mean? Pay attention to the nuances as you're reading, and you'll be able to see a lot that's happening in the negative space. So I just wanted to drop that on y'all, because I know just from my own life experience and from seeing the experience of people that are in my life and strangers, there's a lot that we can all pull from the story of David. And more to come. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to that, but today I just wanted to impress the story of David on your heart. Just put that down, put it in your notes, put it in the queue for your reading list. Get in the story of David and look at the parallels, and I guarantee you it'll create some real positive change, hopefully, in your life, because there's a lot to pull from. Anyway, I'm out of here. We'll chop it up next time. Peace.